Welcome, and thank you for joining our community lecture, Integrative Insider Live. My name is Jessica Drew de Paz, and I'm the Director of Mindfulness Services at the Susan Samueli Integrative Health Institute. I wanted to share that we're recording this session, and I'd also like to share a few Zoom tips. Please minimize distractions. Clear off your desk, close the door, and close any applications that may be open, whatever helps you to be fully present. Everyone will remain on mute, and there will be a Q&A session after the presentation. So please send any questions directly to Alexandra Anderson in the chat on the bottom of your screen. Now I'd like to share a bit about the Susan Samueli Integrative Health Institute. As many of you are aware, our main area of activity is patient care. And our clinic is located on Bristol Street in Costa Mesa. We have satellite clinics in Yorba Linda and at the Pacific Breast Care Center in Newport Beach. And we're excited to announce our new collaboration with UCI Health in Newport Beach, another clinic, which just opened this week on Monday. So this clinic features all of our current evidence-based services from integrative, naturopathic, and osteopathic doctors, nurse practitioners, massage therapists, acupuncturists, and nutritionists, as well as the addition of new integrative specialty services, such as integrative dermatology, gastroenterology, cardiology, and sports medicine. To schedule either an in-person appointment or a telemedicine appointment, visit our website at sssihi.uci.edu. Finally, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Deidre Hughes. Deidre specializes in leading adolescents and young adults to integrate mindfulness, self-compassion, and purpose practices into their lives. She has certifications from the International Mindfulness Teachers Association and Mindful Schools. Deidre is a trained teacher of making friends with yourself, which brings self-compassion to adolescents and young adults, and Project Wayfinder, which fosters a mindset of meaning and purpose. She recently launched both programs to our teen community, and afterward, participants completed anonymous evaluations. We asked what their thoughts were before the program began versus their perceptions at the end, and the differences were striking. Nearly all of them indicated that beforehand, they were not sure what to expect, and they were not looking forward to it. By the end, everyone shared that they found value in the material and that they would recommend the program to a friend. We are proud that Deidre has joined the Institute and thrilled that we all get to hear from her this evening. Please join me in welcoming Deidre Hughes, or as I like to call her, the Teen Whisperer.
Oh, anyway, thank you very much. That's a very, very kind introduction. I wanted to begin just by welcoming everyone in the room and creating a sense of belonging and community together. So if you would join me in just taking a look at who's actually here, kind of noticing who's in the room, and perhaps, if you're willing, to go to the chat and to welcome somebody who's here individually. We want it to go to everyone so we can see it, but if to actually mention it, somebody by name, right? So for example, just writing in the chat, Jessica, I hope you're having a great evening. Similar to what we would do if we were in a room together, face to face. We would maybe turn to the person next to us and say hello, and just kind of welcome everybody into the space. So if you don't mind joining me, just taking a moment and in the chat, just take a look at who's in the room, and as best you can from the name that they have on the on Zoom, just welcoming them here this evening. We had several people mention that they're teachers, and I wanted to just say that this is a great way to build belonging and community in the classroom setting if you're on Zoom. Just every single day having the ritual of inviting your students who are on your in your Zoom space to greet somebody in the room by name, welcoming them on every given day. Thank you for participating. I appreciate that a lot. It can change the environment to do things intentionally to create a sense of belonging, particularly when we're in the situation of the pandemic, and many times we are reaching out to each other virtually, which always has a bit of disconnection to it. So I wanted to also begin the session today by just taking a moment to arrive. So if you could, if you're comfortable, you could let your eyes close, or you also could just have a downward gaze and just to take a moment to be fully present here. Perhaps beginning by noticing the sounds in the room where you are, and just taking your full attention and listening well. Perhaps noticing with curiosity the sounds that you may not have heard before that were nonetheless present. And then taking a moment to acknowledge the effort and intentions that brought you here. And finally, perhaps setting an intention for the next hour for the session. And then when you're ready, if your eyes are closed, letting them open and bringing your presence into the Zoom space. Or if you have a downward gaze, bringing your eyes back to the screen and just arriving fully. I wanted to take a moment and just review what I plan to talk about this evening. I'm going to cover some of the mental health statistics that we're learning, what we know already about young adults and adolescents, as well as what's being revealed in relation to COVID and the pandemic. I also plan to cover a little bit of the neuroscience that underlies mindfulness, self-compassion, and mindset work, as well as give a brief overview and define what mindfulness, self-compassion, and purpose and belonging mindsets are. Lead a short formal practice so you can get a bit of the experience of some of the things that we do in our teen programs, and then also offer you some informal practices, things that you can do in your everyday life, and things that you can offer to the teens that you know and love, and a brief overview of the programs that we are launching at the Institute, as well as a bit of time for Q&A at the end. Throughout the time here, I am going to refer to some of the experts in the field. So I'm doing this in part because I know when I'm in a presentation, I love to know who's really doing the work in a particular field. And so you can just jot down the names and then you can Google them. There's so much information out there right now on mindfulness and self-compassion and mindset work. is a very robust field. So there's a lot you can learn in a very short time if you just start to delve in a bit. So I'm sure many of you are aware that we have been seeing for several decades increases in depression and anxiety in particular among our youth, and that this increases as they grow older. So, and this has been increasing in the last few decades. So as you'll see the CDC information on the screen, depression and anxiety in particular has increased or increases as youth grow older. I've seen this myself. I teach at Fullerton College, and I've been there. This is my 30th year working there as an instructor, and I have seen among my students an overwhelming number of students who are struggling with anxiety and depression. So this is a real health concern. We also see increases numbers of suicides. That's reflective of these same mental health struggles. Teens themselves notice this among their peers. So 70%, this is a Pew Research Center released this information recently, that 70% of teens report that anxiety and depression is a major problem among their peers. And now, of course, COVID is making matters worse. We're seeing more and more research come out recently on the effects of COVID for all different populations, but certainly for teens and for young adults. So teens are reporting loneliness and isolation. Greater than 50% say that they need mental health services, and 55% say they don't know where to go. This makes sense because there's kind of an extra step for a teen to get help when it comes to mental health services that adults really don't have, is not present for adults. So I feel like the work of the Health Institute, bringing in and developing the teen program and the adolescent program is meeting a very real need in society right now. There are also studies came out, the US National Pandemic Emotional Impact Report reported that 90% of their respondents said that they were experiencing emotional distress related to the pandemic. Now, this was, for the most part, these were adults, but if you're sitting right there feeling that, like, oh my gosh, this has been really hard. I know I feel that quite a bit. This has been hard. There are a lot of different reasons that it's challenging. You are obviously in the majority. The CDC did a mental health report as well that included more information on our young adult population. And in ages 18 to 24, 75% were reporting that they have mental health or behavioral health concerns. So it's just a huge, huge number. So the person who commented on this study and was part of the authors of the study, she at the end commented that this study says we need help, especially in certain populations. That would be young adults. And mental health needs to be the focus of all of our conversations. So I feel like this is a real call for us to be thinking in a very dedicated way about how we can serve the needs and provide resources for adolescents and young adults. In a sense, right now, we're seeing a lot of efforts, and appropriately, to get adolescents and young adults on board with wearing masks, social distancing, in order to protect their health. And I think at the same time, we need to have the same kind of robust approach with how we help our teens and adolescents, our young adults, figure out how they protect their emotional well-being. Because although we have many of them reporting that they're suffering greatly, we also have, the whole population, I guess I'm saying, needs to be making sure that they're thinking, just like they think about their physical health, they need to be thinking about their emotional well-being. The programs that we're offering here at the Institute are programs that are good for everyone. They're programs that I taught well before the pandemic. They're programs that we've been teaching at Fullerton College in an effort to be preventative, in a sense, toward challenges when it comes to emotional well-being and our psychological health. And I think now we really need to be thinking about that in a dedicated way. Like, okay, so we need, as parents and teachers and people who work and love young people, to be talking to them and working with them on ways that they can keep themselves emotionally healthy in an incredibly challenging situation. So the first the first practice I wanted to talk to you about was, or introduce to you, is mindfulness. And I'm going to assume many of you are aware of mindfulness. It's out there everywhere, but I still wanted to provide a little bit of background knowledge in case it's new to you or you've never really known exactly what mindfulness is. It's all over popular culture, so you hear the term a lot, but many times it's not defined. Jon Kabat-Zinn is a physician who really brought mindfulness from the spiritual world into the secular world. And he did that through a program that he created called MBSR, which is mindfulness-based stress reduction. You may be familiar with it. And he worked with patients who had chronic pain and other types of ailments and was actually able to show through his research at University of Massachusetts that people improved their physical health through mindfulness. So they, for example, they had lowered blood pressure. They could go off blood pressure medicine, as a matter of fact, from learning how to do mindfulness. They had their inflammation markers went down. So there were some really indicators that it had profound effects on physical health, and that just propelled it into the secular world. His definition of mindfulness is that it's an awareness. So this means that if you think about, sometimes when I'm working with students, I'll say, just imagine if you are in a dark parking lot, like how your awareness shifts and you start to really pay attention in a different way to what's around you. You have heightened awareness. Mindfulness is an awareness practice. It's shifting our attention in a particular way with intention. So on purpose, we're taking our attention and putting it in a particular way. And that particular way is in the present moment, noticing what's arising for us. So instead of spending time or having our awareness, which oftentimes it is in the past, perhaps going over some things that we've done or decisions we've made or conversations we've had, or even sinking into rumination, which can lead to depressive states, we're instead taking some time in our day to have it focused on the present. We also can find ourselves focused on the future a lot. So we focus on the future. Obviously, it's necessary to a certain extent with planning, etc. But nonetheless, we can get into catastrophic thinking, into worry and concern about the future, and we can lose any opportunity to be in the present. We know that people have the most when they're in the present, they have the most positive psychological experiences. So they feel happier. So it's really something to consider. And all of us have had mindful moments. We've all had that moment when we felt completely present in a particular environment. And it's helpful to just think about that. Often at times that happens in the natural world, or sometimes in a conversation when we feel really connected to the people we're with, or perhaps even a holiday when you really feel connected. Those moments are a pathway in. So if you're working with young adults or with adolescents or teens, this can be really helpful because you really want to use their mindful experiences that they already have currently as a foundation upon which to build. And you can just encourage that. And, I received questions before this talk that people were interested in me answering. So I'm trying to kind of answer those as I go. But one of the questions was about, how do I introduce this to a young person? I always start with having them bring to mind moments that they were in the present moment and they had the joy and that feeling of ease and happiness in that present moment by giving them examples. So, and they're all able to recall those. And then once you do that, that's like a pathway in. Sometimes you never even need to use the word mindfulness. I think that if youth are resistant to the term, particularly your children, that you're better off not even using the term, but rather learning about it yourself, developing your own practice, and then finding ways to introduce it that don't necessarily call it out as mindfulness. So anyway, in the present moment, and then non-judgmentally. So we're noticing what's arising without judgment, without saying, oh, I can't believe I'm thinking this or I'm feeling this. It's more of a reaction of like, so that's what's here. This noticing with curiosity and with kindness, right? An acceptance. Okay, well, this is what's here for me right now. And then over time, right, we can have some sort of inquiry if we start to notice patterns or things arising consistently. And then that might prompt us to take some wise or skillful action. Studies have shown that mindfulness meditation reduces stress, improves physical and mental well-being, and produces satisfactory changes in life. So there are tons of studies if you want to go out and check that out. Someone wrote in about their daughter experiencing a lot of frustration around the fact that her friends are not wearing masks, they are not social distancing, and as a result of that, she's now online completely. It's her senior year of high school, and her life is being profoundly affected by others' lack of social responsibility or lack of care or whatever it may be, right? And the person was saying that their daughter's really, really frustrated with that and very angry. And how can I deal with that when it comes to mindfulness? And so I just thought we can use that scenario as I go through each of the 3 things I'm going to talk about. And we can kind of think about how we might use mindfulness as a way, as a segue in to help this young person who's struggling a bit. So with mindfulness, if my daughter, and I have a 16-year-old daughter, and she actually feels very similarly, interestingly enough. But one of the things that I try to do is to just name it, like when she's having that experience, let's just notice what's arising. Okay, well, it sounds, so you're feeling frustration, or how would you label that emotion you're feeling? Okay, it's anger. So, and then doing a little bit of work with like, so where does that anger live in you? I know when I get really angry, I start to feel my stomach tighten, right? And have her begin to explore the experience of the emotion in the moment in an effort for it to move through her. So we know with trauma, there's a lot of, I'm also trained in some trauma work with mindfulness, and trauma is about, putting our, kind of beginning to dip our toe into these hard experiences and moving them through our body. So training or helping a young person develop that ability, that capacity when they're 15 or 16 or 17 is a huge gift, and a huge gift. Okay, I'm going to stop there and move to the next slide. So the next practice I want to introduce to you is self-compassion. So the big names of self-compassion is Kristen Neff and Chris Germer. And self-compassion, they introduced a program called Mindful Self-Compassion that's internationally well known. And the program that we have at UCI at the Institute is an adaptation of MSC, of Mindful Self-Compassion. The idea of self-compassion is quite easy in the sense to understand. It's simply treating yourself with kindness and when things are difficult. So it's a way to embrace a challenge and struggle and offering yourself kindness. There are 3 elements to this: mindfulness, so what we just talked about, and that should make sense to you because in order to offer yourself compassion, you need to know what's arising. And it sounds simple, but it's not really that simple. And as you probably know, I mean, sometimes we think we're feeling this, but we're not feeling that. Sometimes we act this way, but it's really about that. It's not that simple to really know just simply, what is arising, right? And it's from there that we can begin to think about, okay, so this is what's arising, and now this is what I need in response to this. So that would be the self-kindness piece. And then also developing an understanding and awareness that we are all interconnected beings and that there's common humanity. So when we begin to experience, say, profound sadness or loss, oftentimes we feel very alone. And that's what can lead to suicide, right? To those kinds of very tragic and extreme choices and outcomes. So if we can remember, oh my gosh, you know what? Many, many people experience profound sadness and grief. I'm not alone, right? I'm not alone in this. So self-compassion, studies show that it reduces levels of self-criticism. That makes sense. Depression, anxiety, rumination, and that people are able to embrace challenge in a much more productive way. And that they have better coping mechanisms and strategies. That makes sense as well. Many people think that if you are too kind to yourself that you'll become, I always tell myself, like, I'll become a slacker, I won't do anything, and that all the research shows, interestingly enough, that is the exact opposite. that the nicer people are to themselves, the more they have understanding that they are interconnected with other beings in their struggles, and the more that they're able to notice when they're struggling and what that struggle is about, they're actually more productive. So I find that very interesting because I grew up, my dad was in the Marine Corps, so I grew up in a very kind of hardcore family in the sense of like, well, if it's tough, push through. And so this research is super interesting to me. So let's go back to the scenario with the girl who's struggling with her friends who aren't social distancing. With self-compassion, I would be moving toward asking her, okay, after you kind of work through the mindfulness piece, I would ask her questions like, so do you have any other friends who feel this way? Knowing her friends, right? As a parent, you could name a few people, just to develop that sense of common humanity so that she doesn't feel alone in her outrage or her frustration. And then I would also say, okay, well, is there something you could do for yourself right now? Can I help you find something that would just make you feel a little bit better in this moment? Because this is really hard, like really, really sinking in with acknowledging the frustration, the anger, the sadness, right? Because there's something, if you're interested, it's called ambiguous loss, but that's what this is. It's an ambiguous loss. It's not a loss that she can necessarily, articulate or find in a book, but it's definitely a loss, right? So being able to really validate that, as well as connect her to others who might be experiencing it, and then asking her how she might be able to offer herself small things of kindness in those moments. The final practice that I wanted to review is work with mindsets. And purpose is the primary mindset. Belonging is it comes along with it. So we don't have enough time to go into all of this in detail, but the big name in this is Bill Damon, who's up in Stanford. He has done a lot of work with purpose mindset and how it is transformative to help young people have a foundation, or the way they think about their life is founded on meaning and knowing their why, as opposed to other things, right, that typically are out here and that are not from in here, they're out here. So purpose, the definition is an intention to accomplish something that's meaningful to the self and consequential to the world beyond the self. So when teens feel purposeful, they know why they're doing what they're doing, and that helps them to be more accepting of others. It helps them to not lapse into behaviors of bullying or antisocial kind of behaviors. And interestingly, it has been shown to increase their academic engagement and even their GPAs, because they have a sense of why they're doing what they're doing. They're not just going to school and doing the tasks at hand because their parents are telling them to do it, or because it's just required or whatever. They develop this sense of a bigger picture. There are lots of positive outcomes for adults as well in terms of purpose, hope, resilience, work-life satisfaction, and even physical well-being. If we go back to the student who is struggling with her friends and the social distancing and the mask wearing or not mask wearing, I would work with her on, there's something that we do where they're called spark statements, but it's a statement about something that's really, like something that angers you, for example. They're different sentence lead-ins, but so I'm really angry that all these people are not wearing masks and they're, and what you do is you kind of just keep asking the question to help the person arrive at a core value, right? So I was playing with this last night in my own mind, and I was like, so, I'm angry because these people aren't wearing their masks. The question you ask is, well, why does that matter to you? Why does it matter to you, that they're not wearing their masks? And then you get a response, and then you keep asking the question until you arrive at a core value. And as I did this, we don't have enough time for me to run you through it, but as I did this in my mind, right, I could imagine a young person either coming at the core value of friendship. Like, it matters to me ultimately because I love and care about my friends, and I want to see them. I want to be with them in my senior year of high school. Or it might come around to a core value of social responsibility and helping our community, having a sense of connection to others. But either way, then your daughter, your son is walking away going, oh my gosh, you know what? I'm like, this is about how I care about social responsibility. Or one thing I really value, my why, my North Star, are my friends. right? And that's a much more helpful way to start to process what can I do, because then we could look at what are your skills and strengths, what is your joy, let's pull those together, and maybe we could think about something we could actually do to have some sort of impact in a situation where you feel very powerless, probably. So I hope that gives you a sense of just kind of these mindsets. I want to make sure it's very easy to get over in time. Okay, so I think we're doing okay. So I'd like to ask you I want to talk a little bit about the neuroscience, because none of these programs or these practices would be in our schools where they're now very prevalent, or being offered by UCI Health, or the many places that we're seeing them, if there wasn't neuroscience and science behind it. So I'd like to teach you something that I teach my students. It's actually, okay, so Dan Siegel is the person who came up with this hand model to just teach people about the brain. And if you're a parent, and part of the reason that you're here is because you're interested in learning more about mindfulness and how you can integrate it into parenting, I would definitely check out his books. He also has a book called Brainstorm. That's also a great book that helps you to understand how you can bring neuroscience and mindfulness to little kids. So this is actually, he suggested teaching this to young kids. I taught to my daughter when she was probably 5, but now at Fullerton College, we have taught it to the administrators, we've taught it to the teachers, we've taught this to everyone. And it really helps people just to understand the basics. So I'd like to invite you to join me if you like. So you would hold up your hand, and this is the brain. So right here, this is the brain stem, okay, which would be back here. And then I'd like you to tuck your thumb in, and the tip of your thumb is the amygdala, which is the fight or flight or freeze response. This whole part of our brain back here is what we call the reptilian part of the brain, or the limbic part of the brain, the limbic region. This is the old part of the brain, the part of the brain that we share with reptiles. So the amygdala, fight, flight, or freeze response. And then if you just curl your fingers over, this represents the prefrontal cortex. That's this part of our brain right here. It's located right here. And this, the function of the prefrontal cortex is to help us with reasoning capacity and also complex emotions like empathy. And if you notice, when everything's great and your nervous system is nice and calm, the amygdala is tucked in there, that there are a lot of connections between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. So you're able to, say a door slams and you have a little startle, you immediately, your prefrontal cortex comes in and says, oh, the wind just blew. And so you stay, nice and all calm and at ease. But what happens oftentimes is that we flip our lid. So things happen, stimuli happen, and we actually go offline. And when we go offline, we no longer have access to our prefrontal cortex, because our amygdala is thinking that it needs to save our lives. Unfortunately, we don't have that many situations where our lives need to be saved in this way, but our body still reacts as though we do, right? The body still reacts as though there's a tiger running after us. But in actuality, there's no tiger there. So this is really helpful for kids in school, because you study really hard for a test, right? And you've learned all the material, you go in, and then your heartbeat starts to get elevated a little bit. Your teacher tells you how important it is, right? All this stuff happens. You see how well your friends have studied, who knows? And you flip your lid, and you have math anxiety, you have test anxiety, and you can't recall what you just studied the night before. That's a physical reaction. That's no weakness on your part. That's actually your body just doing what it is by evolution set to do. So mindfulness and self-compassion and purpose from the reasoning component can help us to keep ourselves calm. We know the mindfulness helps us to keep that prefrontal cortex engaged. We know that it increases connections between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, so you're less likely to go offline. And we know even that over time, with consistent mindfulness practices, we shrink the size of the amygdala. So we're actually less likely to get that stimuli, that effect. The other thing I want to mention about neuroscience is that we know that we're continually building neural pathways. There's also a mindfulness expert up at Santa Clara University, Dr. Shauna Shapiro, and she coined this phrase, what you practice grows stronger. So if you practice being anxious and stressed out, you create neural pathways, they become well worn. And then when things happen, you get stressed out. That's where your brain goes. Again, it's not something you can control besides beginning to practice in a different way. If you practice being calm through formal mindfulness practices or informal practices in the everyday life, you'll be more likely to be calm. The final thing around neuroscience is that there's a lot of evidence that we are highly attuned to one another through mirror neurons. So you may have seen some of the pictures of babies when they respond to parents in this regard, but this is true all the way through life. So one of the things that you can do is most important to help your adolescents and teens and young adults in your life is to develop your own personal practice so you can be as calm and as at ease as you possibly can, so that then the people around you are feeling your presence in that way. Okay, I think that's all I have to say on that. So I want to see where I am. I want to do, yeah, so we will do a short formal practice. So a formal practice, just so you know, is where one would close one's eyes and have a guided meditation, or it could be silent as well. So with dedicated intention, bringing oneself into a state of mindful awareness. We know over time, the more often you put yourself into a state of mindful awareness, then it can become a trait. So I'd like to lead you in a short practice that is one of the practices that we do with the teens around self-compassion, and it connects with some of the things that we were just talking about. So it's going to be about 5 minutes, just so you have a sense of how long it is. And I'd like you to sit back and get into a mindful posture. That could be, I tell students, it's alert yet relaxed, right? And that could be if you're in a comfortable chair, hey, ease back and relax. If you're near a bed or a couch, maybe you want to just lay back for a moment and take a moment for yourself. And perhaps begin by just noticing where your body is being held by the earth or by a surface. So for example, if you're in a chair, maybe you could direct your attention to where your body is hitting the chair, under your legs, and your back is hitting the back of the chair. Just feel those touch points. Or if your feet are on the ground, notice where your feet are hitting the floor, carpet, the rug. And just sink in a bit. Taking a moment to notice, is there any tension in your body? And perhaps breathing in, and on the exhale, just relaxing that part of your body a bit, if it's possible. And to begin, what I'd like you to do is to bring to mind a situation in your life that is challenging, a situation that's causing you a little stress right now. It could be a work problem, could be something at school if you're a student, maybe a slight tension with a family member or a friend. Select something that is in the moderate range. So we don't want to pick something that's on a scale of 1 to 10, a 10, but rather something that's a 3 or a 4. So it causes a little agitation for you, but it's not the most challenging situation you've ever had. And then just notice if you feel any tension in your body as you bring this situation to mind. And now, as you're noticing this situation and how it may be manifesting in your physical sense, say to yourself silently, this is a moment of suffering. Or perhaps there's other words that may speak to you better, like this is stressful, or this hurts, and this is sad. This is mindfulness. And now say to yourself, hardship or challenge or suffering is a part of life. You could also say, I'm not alone, or this is how it feels when people struggle in this way. This is common humanity. And now, if you're comfortable, put your hands over your heart or another soothing place, perhaps on your arms, and just feel the gentle touch of your own hand. And say silently to yourself, may I be kind to myself. May I give myself what I need. That's self-kindness. Other phrases that may connect with you, maybe may I accept myself as I am, or may I begin to accept myself as I am. If you're struggling to come up with the right words, maybe imagine a dear friend is having the same problem as you. What would you say to this person? What simple message would you deliver to a friend? Explore whether you can offer that to yourself. And now release the challenging situation from your mind. And just take a moment to reconnect with yourself, focusing your attention on your breath, noticing each inhale and each exhale. In just a moment, I'm going to ring a bell. And when I do, I'd like you to listen to the sound of the bell from the beginning to the very end. And then when you can't hear it anymore, bring your awareness back into the space, into the room. Okay, so that's just a little flavor of the mindfulness piece and the self-compassion piece. If we were in a group, I would ask you what your experience was of that. But since we don't have time this evening, I won't do that. But I hope that you feel more at ease and relaxed, and it just helps you to kind of see what mindful self-compassion is. So I just have a couple moments left, so I wanted to just introduce two informal practices to you, and I'm just going to tell you what they are, and you can maybe practice them for yourself or teach them. I've taught both of these to my daughter, and I also teach these to people at school too, to teachers. So 2 feet in a breath is a really interesting practice. It was developed for physicians because physicians were complaining and patients were complaining, especially when HMOs started going crazy, that the physicians were complaining they were completely stressed and they would go into an office. They couldn't even focus on the patient. Patients were complaining that their doctors were, zip, 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 get out of here. I got somebody else, and they didn't feel heard. They didn't feel that they were getting the kind of attention that they needed. So they did some work with teaching physicians 2 feet in a breath. So the practice is very simple. You simply, before you walk in to a particular space, you take a moment, and you can do it right now. You just focus on your feet. 1 breath, and then you focus on an inhale and an exhale. This is great for teachers because teachers come into spaces completely stressed out half the time, and then they've got a bunch of students coming at them. So, but it's true for work meetings, a lot of different environments, very useful for students too when they're going into classroom settings. And then savor, another very, very impactful informal practice, which is simply to pick, and I'd like you to do it right now too, to think of one thing in your day that you do consistently that is somewhat pleasurable to you. The first time I did this, I picked taking a shower. And for the next week or whatever, it still stays with me even to this day. And that must have been like 10 years ago. But anyway, when you take the shower each day, just kind of notice the water, bring yourself fully present through sensory awareness into the experience. And it could be drinking a cup of coffee in the morning. It could be, anything, right? But you want to pick something that's enjoyable and that is something that you do every day. And then I'm actually talking a little bit about this tomorrow at work, and I just thought this might be helpful. This is things that you can do as rituals at the beginning or the end of a class, but also this is completely appropriate to parenting. So I do these with my daughter quite a bit. So for example, you can, when you sit down to a dinner table with your kids, you can say like, okay, let's just all arrive. And you don't have to be all zen about it. You can just be like, oh, okay, whew, we're all here. Let's just take a moment and notice each other. You gotta, especially with kids, I think you have to be really, really kind of relaxed about it, right? Or, I have my daughter and I write one thing we're grateful for once a week. And then we just save them. And on New Year's, we open them up and look at them all. It's a way to kind of go over the whole year. We do at work, I often have students do a 1-word check-in, just boom, 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 just give me 1 word to describe how you're feeling. So I wanted to include that too. You can do these as a parent, you could do all of these with your kids. Finally, we have these 2 programs. I've kind of alluded to them already, and I think we want to wrap up here. So we have the Making Friends with Yourself that introduces the mindful self-compassion to teens. And then we have Project Wayfinder that really helps teens to develop a sense of purpose, meaning, knowing their why, their what matters to them, and using that as their foundation, as opposed to, oh my gosh, how many AP classes do I need to get into college, or those kinds of things, or what, some of my students who come from lower income or more disadvantaged situations, they're worried about how am I going to make money is the primary concern, without thinking about what matters to them in the world and what's going to help them to develop a meaningful life. So I believe that is all I have. So I'm going to toss it back to Jessica.
Great. Thank you so much, Deidre. This was wonderful. And I think you've actually addressed a lot of the questions that have already come in, because I know we've sent those your way. If anyone has anything else that they would like Deidre to address, I actually think you can send it directly to me in the chat under Jessica. So feel free to do that. But maybe I'll ask you one other question I see here, and that is, what would you recommend teens do to stay emotionally strong as the pandemic drags on?
I mean, I think that I immediately begin to think of my own daughter in a sense, like how am I trying to help her stay emotionally strong as the pandemic rages on? And it's honestly through helping her to process all the different emotions that are arising through using the techniques that I've already discussed. I mean, honestly, I try to help her think about how she might be able to take the challenging things and perhaps transform them into some sort of concrete action in this world so she doesn't feel disempowered, because I think that's a very natural feeling. We feel like everything is out of control and we have no ability to access control in the situation. I try to encourage her to do things like take a break and just go listen to your music, like lay on your bed and just put your AirPods in or your earbuds in and just listen to your favorite music. That's a mindfulness practice, but it's one that teens, what I see a lot is that what they do is they have like 3 screens on, and so kind of finding a way to lead them to these situations where they'll calm their nervous system, deactivate their nervous system without doing it in a formal way that you may meet with resistance, right? So noticing what do they like, and then I think getting them outside. We know that nature really deactivates the nervous system. It puts us in the present moment. So any way that you can do that, some of us have more and less capacity to do that. And then of course I encourage my daughter to have a lot of access with her friends in whatever way is safe. That would all be virtual in my world, but nonetheless, that connection is still helpful. It's not the same thing. We know it's not the same thing, but it's helpful. Final thing, I would pay attention I just make sure you're paying attention to any signs of concern, and then get psychological assistance if you need it, because I think the statistics are showing us that a lot of kids are suffering in a way that they have never experienced before. They may have a hard time even articulating that. And I think we want to be really, really careful and bring in expertise. And that would be, clinical psychologists to come in and help when we need it.
Great. Thank you so much, Deidre. I learn so much from you every time I'm with you. Helps me with my 13-year-old son. When I listen to you, I'm going to go tell him to listen to his music, and I'm going to listen to him more deeply tonight. So thank you for everything. It's so valuable being with you. And I hope everyone here enjoyed this. I'm just going to end with a few comments. First, I did want to share a tiny bit more about what the teens shared after taking Deidre's class. These are some anonymous comments. From the Making Friends with Yourself, someone said, it helped me get more in tune with my emotions. Another said, I honestly really enjoyed it, and I think it's going to help me in the future when I get into certain situations. And another one said, I loved it. And from the Project Wayfinder class, one participant wrote, I enjoyed connecting with others, learning life lessons, and having the ability to speak my opinions without being judged. Another said, my biggest takeaway is that I've learned about what my motives are, what keeps me driven, and how I can help others. And the last said, I realized I have a bright future. So thank you, Deidre, for teaching this to our teens and teaching us how to be more present with our teens. And I know there might even be some teens on this call right now. So glad that you're here as well. You can check out these classes on our website. We also have many different offerings for adults, the mindfulness-based stress reduction, the mindful self-compassion, parenting classes. We would love to see you. Oh, we also have a new one, mindfulness-based relapse prevention. So bringing mindfulness to recovery from any sort of addiction, and that's actually starting very soon, like next week. So if you're interested, please reach out and let me know. Thank you so much, Deidre. Thank you for everything. And thank you to all of the participants for being here. We really are happy and grateful that you chose to spend your evening with us tonight.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you.